Привет! Will the Georgian government be able to avoid another revolution? So, about 3 days ago, I made a video about the beginning of protests in Georgia. It could be a new Euromaidan revolution. The Euromaidan revolution, also known as the Revolution at Diggity, took place in late 2013, early 2014 in Ukraine, named after the Maidan Independence Square in Kiev, and also the Euro Park because it was instigated when the pro-Russian president of Ukraine at the time, Viktor Yanukovych, refused to sign an association agreement between the European Union and Ukraine, something he actually campaigned on. He actually got elected to sign it, and that led to his overthrow and then a pro-EU government replacing him. In Georgia, the ruling party, Georgian Dream, is seen as increasingly friendly to Moscow in spite of Russia, either directly or indirectly through proxies and separatists occupying about 20% of Georgia. They won, in inverted commas, elections a few weeks ago in Georgia, parliamentary elections, to continue in power. However, the pro-European Union opposition has disputed this, and 4 days ago, the European Parliament refused to recognize the results of those elections. They said there were irregularities, so basically agreeing with the opposition, and as a consequence, as a reaction, the Prime Minister of Georgia, who is seen as increasingly pro-Russian, but pro-Russian in inverted commas, but he is seen as friendlier to Moscow, he then stated that they were going to suspend the accession talks between the European Union and Georgia, so Georgia will spend those until 2028. So it basically marks a rupture on the European path that Georgia had been following, something that, again, the ruling party did not say that they were going to do. So it has echoes of what happened with Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine in late 2013, 2014. Now, Georgia has actually had a revolution of its own just over 20 years ago. It was called the Rose Revolution, when the president at the time, Edward Shevardnadze, he lost power, and it brought into power Mikhail Saakashvili, who was seen as very reforming, pro-Western, pro-American, pro-European Union as well for Georgia, and his allies stayed in power for many years afterwards until Georgian Dream came to power, and they are seen increasingly as pro-Moscow. So, all very interesting. The protests have spread in Georgia. They have gotten bigger. They have become more violent in terms of the action by the police, and the counter-reactions or reactions by the protesters. So for me, it really feels like being back in late 2013. Also, the weather is, of course, pretty cold. We're now into the winter in the region. It seems like there are a lot of different revolutions that take place in winter in the region. We had the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. We had also the Euromaidan Revolution in 2013, 2014, and now we have perhaps another revolution. So what can the Georgian Prime Minister do to avert an overthrow of the government? Well, the opposition is demanding new parliamentary elections. That again is very similar to the 2004 Orange Revolution in Ukraine, where Viktor Yanukovych won, in inverted commas, the presidency. Although similar to here, there were allegations of corruption and voting irregularities, and as a result of protests on Maidan Square back in 2004, there was actually a third round, a new runoff election, and then Viktor Yushchenko, who was a pro-EU candidate, won those and came to power. Ironically, Viktor Yanukovych, even though the election results were overturned, he later on became the leader of the country. So that would seem a way out for the Georgian Dream Party and the Prime Minister. However, it's not clear that they're going to take that option. They could just go for a new round of parliamentary elections, and that will probably diffuse the crisis for now. If we look at what happened after the Euromaidan revolution, I discussed in the video from 3 days ago, it was successful in overthrowing the government of Viktor Yanukovych. However, Russia then decided to invade Ukraine. They invaded Crimea first and then began a war in the Donbass eastern region, and that then culminated in the expanded invasion of 2022. So this is actually something that's used by the current Prime Minister, Irakli Hitse, to say that this is a dangerous step the opposition are taking, that they are risking a military confrontation with Russia. However, you may have seen in the last few days that Russia has another issue with an ally that is in Syria, where they have been backing the Assad government for many years during the Syrian civil war. However, rebels or opposition groups have seized a lot of key territory in Syria in the last week, and actually they have a massive crisis there. It seems that Assad is under a lot of pressure, and Russian forces, they have some number of forces in Syria, are perhaps about to have to evacuate. There are reports of that, but I will do that in a video tomorrow about the situation in Syria. So not only does Russia have an enormous amount of material, money, and manpower invested in the Russo-Ukrainian war. It is the biggest land war in Europe since World War II. Russian losses are estimated at around 700,000, 800,000 in terms of killed in action, missing in action, and injured in action. So massive amount of manpower resources have been invested there, and they've actually accelerated the intensity of the war over the last few months. Now they have other crises on the periphery and amongst allies, like in Syria and in Georgia. So could Russia intervene like they did in 2014 militarily by trying to seize, when they seized Crimea illegally? Could they repeat that playbook in Georgia? They also invaded Georgia in 2008, remember, when they fought a war, a rather brief war with Georgia, and they advanced as far as Gori. They secured what have been pro-Russian separatist areas in Abkhazia. They actually expanded that, and in South Ossetia in the north of the country. So they could take a military option. However, that would mean diverting resources away from their main theater of action, obviously in Ukraine. A small part of Russia is actually occupied by Ukrainian forces. Remember, in the Kursk region has been a big priority to eject Ukrainian forces from there. Russia has taken back some of the territory in the last month or so. However, since the summer, Ukraine actually occupies part of Russia. Donald Trump is about to be inaugurated in the second half of January. There's a lot of speculation that he will make overtures to find some sort of cessation of hostilities in Ukraine. So Russia's really pushing there. Do they have the resources to intervene in Georgia? That is a big question mark, whether they would go for that, because it risks undermining their attempts to take as much Ukrainian territory as possible and to liberate the small part of Russia that's currently occupied by Ukrainian troops. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops. Definitely for me, there is a lot of nostalgia. I went as an observer on my own capacity at the time to the Euromaidan revolution on two occasions, in late 2013 and early 2014. I have a video about that on my lifestyle channel that I shot many years ago talking about. I'll link that down below in the description to this video. So that is today's video. A lot of interesting things happening in Georgia. We could be seeing the beginning of a new revolution in Georgia. Don't know what it's going to be called yet. And the Euro-Tbilisi revolution. But there is a way out for the current government. They can go for early elections. The opposition is being led politically by the current president of Georgia, who is scheduled to be replaced pretty soon, but that is also a question whether she's actually going to leave. She doesn't recognize that the government is legitimate, the prime minister. So we have this huge political crisis in Georgia. The government has a way out of diffusing in the short run, but if they don't take that option, then there is a risk from their point of view that there will be some sort of putsch against them in the coming days, weeks, and months. And Russia is pretty preoccupied elsewhere. So that's what I will say on today's video, in today's videos. So see you in the next one.